Young man has lost. That body refiner who challenged the entire Snow's Lament by himself has lost just like that. He wasn't even able to resist a single attack. The minds of all the spectators had gone blank because the shock they experienced from this scene was truly too great. Mu Qingfeng's brows knit together tightly because she hadn't expected that this would happen. After all, she looked very favorably upon young man who just joined Lunar Right Hall, but she hadn't expected that he wouldn't even be able to resist a single blow from Man Shi. How can any human dare to compete in body refinement with my Man clan? Man Shi glanced at the surroundings and spoke with arrogance. I, Man Shi, will be the #1 body refiner in the hallowed grounds from today onwards. If you aren't convinced of it, then the consequences that fellow young man just suffered will be what all of you will experience. At this moment, Man Shi was beyond self-satisfied, and the excitement and madness on his face even caused it to warp a little. However, he quickly noticed that the spectators weren't looking at him. He looked along their vision, and then his face instantly froze, because Yang Yi had stood up and was walking slowly towards him. You're actually unharmed. Man Shi stared fixedly at Yang Yi, and for the very first time since the battle started, he revealed a solemn expression in his eyes. Yang Yi walked slowly towards Man Shi and said, I sense that your strength instantly experienced an explosive increase of over 10 times just now. I presume you've either cultivated some sort of secret technique or possess some sort of treasure. But I feel that the possibility of the latter being true is much higher, because I clearly felt that your fist didn't feel like the fist of a human when it collided with mine. I'm really interested in that treasure of yours. Why don't you let me have a look? Don't worry, I'll definitely allow you to lay eyes on it before you die. Man Shi had a gloomy expression on his face while killing intent surged through his eyes. The reason he'd revealed his trump card right at the beginning of the battle was so that he could make a name for himself through this battle. But he hadn't imagined that Yang Yi would actually be completely unharmed from his full strength. It wasn't just him, even the 4 half-saints of the Man clan had been taken by surprise. However, it wasn't killing intent which flickered through their eyes. It was excitement, because it meant that Yang Ye's cultivation technique was definitely extremely formidable, or it was some sort of special method of cultivation. Regardless of whether it was a technique or a method, it was absolutely good news for the Man clan, because it might allow the Man clan to discover any path of body refinement. Then let's give it another try. Yang Yi had just finished speaking when his figure arrived before Man Shi, and then his fist blasted forward. However, it was unlike the punch from before. The strength carried by this punch was countless times greater than before, so space shook while the ground shattered before it. Man Shi didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest. The profound energy within him surged into his right fist, and then he pushed his fist forward. Their fists collided once more. Bang! An enormous explosion resounded before both of them moved backwards. But it didn't take long for Yang Yi to stop himself. However, Man Shi was still moving backward repeatedly, and he only stopped after taking around 100 steps back. The difference in their strength was obvious. After that, booing started resounding through the surroundings. Man Shi, didn't you say that you're the #1 body refiner in the human race? Why have you lost now? How could you have lost? So you were just spouting bullshit? No wonder you stank so much just now. So you were just full of shit. What is it like to be slapped right on the spot? This is exactly it. Man Shi, why are you blushing? Could it be that the cultivation technique of your Man clan is too formidable, so it made your face turn red? That's not because of his cultivation technique. That's because of anger. You can't even discern that? You must be blind. So it was because of anger. Ha 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 ha. It was mostly the members of Lunar Right Hall who were ridiculing Man Shi. Of course, there were also some who were watching from the surroundings. Actually, many had intended to just watch the show, but disgust had been instantly aroused within them when they saw Man Shi act so arrogantly. After all, few were fond of arrogant madmen. Man Shi's face twitched when he heard the ridicule that came from the surroundings. He grabbed his shirt and suddenly pulled at it, causing it to be instantly transformed into powder. The ridicule and mocking that came from the surroundings instantly died down when they saw Manxi's body. Manxi's body was ink green in color, and the symbols which covered his body were wriggling slowly while his veins had bulged up completely. His body seemed very mysterious yet filled with explosive strength. That's tattoo enhancement. Muhi spoke with a slightly solemn voice. I never expected that his body has actually been covered in talismans. What does that mean? Asked Mu Qingfeng. Muhi spoke in a deep voice. It's common knowledge that the Tao of talismans is broad and profound. It can be utilized as inscriptions for weapons and treasures, and it can be inscribed on the body as well. However, inscribing the body is an extremely painful process, because those talismans aren't just inscribed on the skin, they're inscribed on the bone and meridians as well. Very few people inscribe their bodies. Firstly, it's because it's an extremely painful process, and none are willing to endure such pain. Secondly, it's very dangerous as the slightest mistake might cause the person's body to be completely crippled. Is it very formidable? Mu Qingfeng spoke in a low voice. Muhi nodded and said, it was called body talismans during the ancient times, and it was capable of improving physical strength and defense. If Manxi's physical body could only compare to the defense and strength of a monarch realm dragon before this, then it's comparable to a human half-saint right now. But don't worry, that fellow young man's physical strength and defense isn't inferior to him at all. Mu Qingfeng nodded and gazed at the battlefield. At this moment, Manxi didn't waste his breath anymore. He roared furiously as he stomped the ground with his left foot, and he instantly shot forward like a cannonball. His fist whistled sharply through the air as it rumbled towards Yang Yi. The formidable force it carried caused a terrifying gust of energy to create rippled in the surrounding space. It was an utterly horrifying sight. A savage smile curled onto the corners of Yang Ye's mouth as he slowly clenched his right fist, and then swung it forward at the instant that Manxi's fist arrived before him. Bang! Their fists collided. The space around their fists shook as the aftershock pushed them back. This time, Manxi took 30 steps back while Yang Yi took 10. Manxi's gaze instantly became ferocious when he witnessed such a scene, and he roared with fury. How could that be possible? How could your body be even stronger than mine? It's impossible. You're cheating. An uproar resounded through the spectators. Isn't that fucker a little too shameless? He can't win, so he calls his opponent a cheater? Fuck. How could he even say something like that? What a disgrace. Alas, this fellow Manxi is really too stupid. Even if he wins this battle, he'll still gain a bad reputation. After all, he couldn't even accept his own defeat. So would anyone think highly of him? What Manxi said didn't just cause numerous profounders in the surroundings to arouse disdain towards him. Even the half-saints shook their heads repeatedly. Even though his strength isn't bad, his character and disposition are truly too inferior. At this moment, even Man Yuan's expression was quite unsightly. He glanced coldly at Yang Yi, and then he said to Manxi, "Stop wasting your breath and get him quickly." Meanwhile, Yang Yi had suddenly attacked. He instantly appeared in front of Manxi, and then his fist carried peerlessly formidable force as it smashed towards Manxi's head. This time, Yang Yi didn't waste his breath on Manxi at all. His fists rained down upon Manxi while Manxi seemed like a madman who was ceaselessly swinging his fists at Yang Yi. Just like that, the two of them collided in the most violent and direct manner. They didn't utilize any techniques or Tao artifacts, and they just smashed their fists against each other in the simplest manner. You punch me once, I punch you once. This caused the blood of the spectators to boil while shock filled their hearts. Because both Yang Yi and Manxi's physical bodies were extremely terrifying, and an ordinary monarch realm expert wouldn't even be able to resist a single punch from them. But at this moment, they were hitting each other like they were punching bags. The battle continued for almost an hour before the gap in their strength slowly became clearer. At this moment, Manxi's speed was slowly becoming incapable of keeping up with Yang Ye's speed and rhythm in battle, and it was even to the extent that he was showing signs of being suppressed. The spectators were shocked by Yang Ye's strength, and they were shocked by Manxi's strength as well. because Man Shi's strength was entirely sufficient to gain a position on the hallowed rankings. But he had no reputation besides his infamy for lusting for women. Another hour passed, and the expressions of Man Yuan and the others turned gloomy. Because Man Shi was already completely suppressed, and he was moving backward incessantly while Yang Yi was growing stronger as the battle progressed. That kid's physical strength and defense are greater than sheer. One of the half-saints by Man Yuan's side spoke in a low voice. Are we still unable to determine his background? Man Yuan spoke solemnly. The old man shook his head in response. Besides that he arrived at the city with Fu Jingxian from the fire spirit race, we've gained no further information. Fu Jingxian should be aware of his background. Unfortunately, she's in Lunar Right Hall now. Alas, we shouldn't have allowed Sheer to act as he pleased earlier. It's fine. No matter who he is, we'll immediately gain the answer we want once he's captured, said Man Yuan in a low voice. Bang! Suddenly, Man Shi was blasted flying. Man Yuan and the others revealed gloomy expressions. Meanwhile, Yang Ye's figure flashed and instantly arrived in the air above Man Shi, and then he stomped his foot down against Man Shi's stomach. Bang! Man Shi's figure was smashed into the ground. Suddenly, Man Shi, who'd just been smashed into the ground, had shot up into the air, and he shot towards Yang Yi like a cannonball. Bang! This time, it was Yang Yi who was blasted flying, and he flew for over 2 kilometers before he finally stopped himself. At this moment, the spectators noticed that Man Shi's entire body was covered in dark golden scale armor, and there wasn't another crack on it besides where Man Shi's eyes were. However, some half-saints noticed that even Man Shi's eyes were covered in an extremely thin layer of golden skin. It's the Saint rank treasure, the Herculean armor. Mu He's voice carried extreme seriousness. That armor was forged from the body of a supreme expert of the Man clan and was enhanced by thousands of Dao rank metals. It possesses both the ability to attack and defend, and even half-saints would find it difficult to penetrate. I never expected that the Man clan would have given it to Man Shi. Looks like they've been fostering him as the next patriarch of their clan. When he spoke up to this point, Mu He added, Young Man is in danger now. Young Man, weren't you very formidable? Weren't you very good with your fists? Come on. Man Shi walked slowly towards Yang Yi while his voice was filled with madness. A solemn expression arose in Yang Ye's eyes as he gazed at the scale armor on Man Shi. His intuition told him that it was absolutely not something that brute strength could break. Young Man, take this. Suddenly, Mu Qingfeng's voice resounded, and then a ray of cold light flashed before a sword descended before Yang Yi. That's the sword of Lunar Right Hall's founder. Its name is Lunar Reverie. Even though it isn't at the Saint rank, it far surpasses the Dao rank. I'll lend it to you for today, said Mu Qingfeng. Yang Yi was stunned as he gazed at the sword which he'd taken in his grasp. The sword was over a meter long, its blade translucent and reflective like glass, and it was curved like a crescent. It was an exquisite sword, and amongst all the swords Yang Yi had come into contact with, only the Mortal Emperor sword could compare to it. Even though he couldn't activate the true strength of the Mortal Emperor sword, he had no doubt about the strength it possessed. Yet this sword before him could actually compare to it. He hadn't witnessed the might of this sword, and it was the first time he'd laid eyes on it, but he had such a feeling at the instant he held it in his grasp. At this moment, Yang Yi was quite conflicted. While it was an amazing sword, the problem was, could he use it? Could he? The answer was that he couldn't. He was absolutely confident in his ability to pierce a hole through Man Shi if he used that sword, but the problem was that Man Shi would definitely not just stand there and allow him to do it. So long as he fought Man Shi, and if he were to dare and reveal his ability as a sword cultivator, then he would definitely be in huge trouble. Yang Yi sighed softly while he glanced at the sword with slight reluctance. He was just about to return it to Mu Qingfeng when Man Shi suddenly said, "Oh my God! You have a sword. It's even the Lunar Reverie. I'm so terrified. Young man, don't scare me. I'm truly afraid." When he spoke up to this point, he suddenly changed his tone and said, "Come! I won't move from this spot and let you stab me with it." I'll allow you to realize how weak you are before my Herculean armor. Yang Yi was slightly stunned, and then joy surged within him. However, he didn't allow his emotions to be revealed on his face as he said, "We shouldn't. I'm afraid you die from just one stab." "One stab from you?" She suddenly started roaring with laughter, as if he'd heard a hilarious joke. "I'm dying of laughter. You actually intend to kill me with just one stab? Come do it. I've decided that I'll let you stab me 10 times. No, 50 times. You'll be my grandson if you can't kill me. You're letting me stab you without defending yourself?" Yang Yi had quite a strange expression on his face as he said, "That isn't good, right?" Even though he spoke those words, he still walked slowly towards Man Shi. "I asked you to do it, so do it. What's with all the crap? Are you a man, or not?" Man Shi suddenly roared furiously. He wanted to humiliate Yang Yi in public because only then could he undo the humiliation and loss of dignity from before. "Sheer. Don't waste your breath and end him quickly." Suddenly, Man Yuan spoke abruptly. While Man Shi was looking down on his opponent and acting carelessly, Man Yuan didn't. His intuition told him that Yang Yi was quite dangerous, and it was especially so when Yang Man had a sword in his hand. Man Yuan didn't know why he had such a feeling, but it was a bad feeling nevertheless. Yang Ye's figure stopped moving, and his eyelids twitched when he heard this. At this moment, he was right before Man Yuan, so he would have no chance if Man Shi fought back right now, because he absolutely couldn't expose his ability to use the sword, or he would have to flee for his life again. Yang Yi just stopped moving, shook his head, and said, "Forget it. Even your grandfather is so worried about you. It's best that I don't stab you, or I might stab you to death and force your grandfather to bury his own grandson." Man Shi, who was about to obey Man Yuan, had instantly exploded with rage. "What bullshit! Even if Zhuo Dengfeng were to rise from the death, I would still be able to fucking beat him to the ground. Come, stab me. Your entire family is full of cowards if you don't dare to do so." This time, Yang Yi didn't hesitate in the slightest, and he shot over to Man Shi while he stabbed the sword towards Man Shi's chest. Clang! A clear and resounding sound of metal colliding resounded. The spectators saw sparks spraying from Man Shi's chest while Yang Yi took 2 steps back. Mu He, Mu Qingfeng, and the others immediately shook their heads when they witnessed such a scene. Because while the sword was exquisite, they felt that Yang Yi didn't know how to use it in the end. Ha ha ha! Meanwhile, Man Shi fully relaxed, and he roared madly with laughter. "Young man, come on! Stab me again. Didn't you intend to kill me with a single stab? Come on and do it again. I'll just stand here." Suddenly, Yang Yi stabbed the sword towards Man Shi's eyes, but it wasn't long before it was stopped by that thin layer of skin. Man Shi was still roaring with laughter. Go on and stab." Hiss. Meanwhile, a strange smile arose on the corners of Yang Ye's mouth as he pressed down a little. And then the sword instantly pierced through that layer of skin and entered Man Shi's head. Man Shi's roaring laughter stopped abruptly. Mu He and the others were astounded. Man Yuan and the others were horrified, and then they were exasperated. All of them flashed out in unison, and they shot explosively towards Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't just stand there idly. He'd quickly pulled out the sword. Once he stabbed it through Man Shi's head, and then he grabbed and tossed Man Shi's corpse into the primordial pagoda. He'd just finished doing that when he sensed 4 enormous palms descending towards him, causing the color of his face to change slightly. Yang Yi didn't dare use the sword again. He put it away and smashed both his fists forward. Bang! Bang! Yang Yi forcefully resisted 2 of those attacked, but 2 more descended upon him and blasted him 3 kilometers away. Die! Man Yuan was furious, and he was just about to launch another attack. However, Mu He and the others recovered from their shock, and they flashed over to obstruct Man Yuan's group. Man Yuan, are you a sore loser? Mu He spoke coldly. Mu He, does your Mu clan really intend to go against my Man clan? Killing intent surged within Man Yuan's eyes. Mu He chuckled with disdain and said, Man Yuan, I finally understand why your grandson was such trash. Turns out that you're the same. Since you allowed him to sign an agreement to fight a battle or life and death, then you should be mentally prepared for his death. What? You're going back on your word once he's dead? You shouldn't have allowed him to sign it if you would. Or perhaps only others can die but the members of your man clan can't. Meanwhile, Elderly spoke as well. Man Yuan, the agreement of life and death was a rule set by the hallowed halls. Since your grandson signed it, then his death can only be considered as a lack of skill. If you look for trouble with young man because of that, then your man clan will really become famous. Do you want the man clan to be infamous for being sore losers? Man Yuan clenched his fists while his face was terrifyingly gloomy, and killing intent even flashed through his eyes. However, he didn't attack. Of course, it wasn't because of what Mu He and Elderly said. It was because he was very clearly aware that it was pointless even if he attacked. A short while passed before Man Yuan took a deep breath, and he said, "Hand Shear's body over, and we can let the matter rest for now. What if I don't?" Meanwhile, Yang Yi had already stood up from the ground. The spectators were astounded when they witnessed this scene because Yang Yi had suffered the attacks of two half-saints. Yet now, not only was he still alive, he could still stand. Moreover, while he didn't seem to be completely unharmed, it was still very terrifying. Is that fellow's body made of iron? If you don't, then die. Man Yuan stared fixedly at Yang Yi. After all, Man Shi was wearing the Herculean armor. While Man Shi was dead, the armor had to be retrieved because it was a treasure passed down in the Man clan. Yang Yi gazed at Mu He and the others before he said, "Senior Mu, what's your opinion on the matter?" Mu He spoke solemnly. "Young man, I promised you earlier that I wouldn't allow others to interfere in the battle. While the battle has come to an end now, my promise still holds. But you have to realize that while I can protect you now, I can't protect you forever. So you have to think it through." Yang Yi chuckled and said, "I'll hand the corpse over, but definitely not now. Moreover, these old dogs won't give up on killing me even if I hand it over now. So why should I? Seniors, if these old dogs intend to attack, then just help me keep them busy for a while. I only need 15 minutes to slaughter the entire Man clan." He intends to slaughter the entire Man clan. The spectators gasped when they heard those words. Mu He's eyelids twitched. He really is a bold fellow. Kill the entire Man clan? It's a clan that has survived for tens of thousands of years. Even if it has suffered decline, it's still an ancient clan. But it wasn't long before he realized that if they did stop Man Yuan and the others, and Yang Yi was allowed to attack the Man clan. Could anyone in the younger generation of the Man clan stop him when they didn't have the support of half-saints? It wasn't just him. Even Man Yuan and the others had thought of such a possibility. So their expressions turned gloomy and unsightly to the extreme. The atmosphere instantly became heavy. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly gazed at the members of Lunar Right Hall and said, "Everyone, the Man clan first kidnapped a member of our Lunar Right Hall, and then it insulted the hallmaster of our Lunar Right Hall. That's a brazen expression of disdain towards our Lunar Right Hall. While I've killed a member of the Man clan today, the humiliation we received hasn't been fully washed away. They have half-saints, but so do we. Are all of you willing to attack the Man clan with me and slaughter it to display the strength of our Lunar Right Hall?" The crowd remained silent for a moment, and then, "Kill. Attack the Man clan. I've been unable to stand the sight of them for a long time. Fuck them. They dared to disregard our Lunar Right Hall and even insult our leader. Fuck the Man clan. Young man, let's do it. For Lunar Right Hall. For our leader. Kill." Countless members of Lunar Right Hall surged with madness, and some even released their auras and were prepared to attack. Grim expressions appeared on Man Yuan and the others. The Man clan would naturally have no need to fear them if it were just those Monarch Realm experts from Lunar Right Hall, but there were 4 half-saints here as well. If those members of Lunar Right Hall attacked, then they would have no choice but to act. And if they were to attack, then Mu He's group would definitely attack as well. At that time, the situation would definitely go beyond their control. Once that happened, then the Man clan would. At this moment, Mu He and the others were slightly stunned as well. They hadn't expected that Yang Yi would stir up the members of Lunar Right Hall. My God, Does he really intend to slaughter the entire man clan? Kill! Suddenly, Xianxia's voice resounded, and then everyone watched as he charged towards the man clan. The members of Lunar Right Hall hesitated briefly before they charged forward with him. You can leave. Right at this moment, Man Yuan suddenly appeared in front of Yang Yi, and he stared fixedly at Yang Yi while both his hands were clenched tightly. Yang Yi said to himself, what a pity, because he was very clearly aware that once Man Yuan had spoken these words, then Mu He and the others would definitely not follow him into war with the Man clan. After all, they'd merely come here to undo the humiliation they'd suffered, and now that they had, they would naturally join him and fight with their lives on the line. Sure enough, Mu He and the others stopped the members of Lunar Right Hall once Man Yuan spoke these words. Mu He glanced at Yang Yi and said, let's go. Yang Yi shrugged, and then he turned around and left. Right at this moment, Man Yuan suddenly said, I'll definitely make you pay tenfold for this humiliation. Yang Yi paid no attention to Man Yuan and quickly vanished from everyone's fields of vision. It didn't take long for the news of Man Shi's death at Yang Ye's hands to spread through the city, and it shocked countless others. After all, the Man clan was an ancient clan, and it wasn't an organization created by the younger generation like Snow's Lament was. But even then, it had still been attacked. Now, countless were even more curious about Yang Ye's identity. On the other hand, many clans and powers which weren't especially strong had hurriedly spread the order that their members were not to offend Yang Man. Moreover, many could be said to have come to an understanding. They'd realized that the body refiner called Yang Man was a complete and utter madman, and misfortune would befall anyone who offended him. Mu He took Mu Qingfeng somewhere that they could talk in private. Yang Man can't be allowed to stay in your Lunar Right Hall. The first words Mu He spoke caused Mu Qingfeng to be stunned on the spot. A short while passed before she asked in a low voice, why? Mu He replied, he's too unyielding and impulsive. Most importantly, he's truly too murderous. He'll definitely bring great disaster to Lunar Right Hall if he's allowed to stay. Just like what happened today. If he spared Man Shi after he defeated Man Shi today, then it wouldn't have almost gone out of control. But he didn't. Moreover, he even intended to slaughter the Man clan. When he spoke up to this point, Mu He's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, I've figured him out. He's an absolutely vengeful fellow. But a person who doesn't know when to stop will definitely be unable to live for long in the hallowed grounds. So, little girl, make him leave Lunar Right Hall. It's for Lunar Right Hall's sake. And it's for your sake as well. Mu Qingfeng fell silent because she wasn't able to refute it at all. This incident had allowed her to truly sense how dangerous that fellow called Yang Man was. Would he have really slaughtered the Man clan if Man Yuan didn't concede? He definitely would. What a headache! Mu Qingfeng shook her head. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something and said, right, Grandpa. Didn't you say that even half-saints wouldn't be able to break through the Herculean armor? Why was he able to succeed just now? According to my observation, he doesn't seem to be skilled in the sword. Mu He frowned for a short while before he spoke. To be honest, I wasn't able to figure it out as well, because the moment he really did it was when all of us felt that he wouldn't be able to succeed, so we didn't observe carefully. Haha. Now it would seem like he was feigning weakness in the beginning, and he was intentionally making everyone let down our guard. That fellow Man Shi was truly a fool. He really was. Mu Qingfeng nodded with strong agreement. If Man Shi hadn't been so conceited and hadn't underestimated his enemy, then it would have been impossible to kill him while he wore the Herculean armor. Unfortunately, Man Shi was filled with conceit. It could be said that Man Shi had died to his own conceit. You decide what to do with Yang Man. Mu He's figure vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Should I let him stay, or make him leave? Mu Qingfeng couldn't avoid having a headache. In a room within Lunar Right Hall, Yang Yi walked over to the bed. Fu Jingxian was seated on the bed. She changed into a set of clean clothes, and her injuries were in a much better state, but the scar on her face was still there. This made her exquisite and gorgeous appearance to become terrifying. Thank you for the 1,000-year-old fire crystal. But isn't it a waste to be giving it to me? Fu Jingxian gazed at him as she spoke softly. Yang Yi shook his head and said, "It was merely a possession, right? That fire crystal should have been sufficient to heal the scar on your face, right? Why? Is it very unsightly?" A smile arose on the corners of Fu Jingxian's mouth as she said, "I think that no man would be interested in me with my current appearance, right?" Yang Yi glanced at her, and then he sighed. "Why go to such lengths?" She answered, "Do you know? Man, she was one of the people who killed my husband and child. I thought the heavens had given me a chance to take revenge when I encountered him today, but I never expected that I would actually be that weak. I was weak to the point that I couldn't kill my sworn enemy even when he stood there and let me attack. Moreover, I even dragged you into all of this. I really hate my powerlessness. I hate myself." Cough. As she finished speaking, her agitated emotions caused strands of blood to flow out of the corner of her mouth. Yang Yi withdrew a piece of cloth and passed it to her. "Man, she is dead. I killed him myself." Fu Jingxian grew even more agitated. A long time passed before she finally calmed down. She took the cloth from Yang Yi, wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth, and then gazed at him. "You know, everyone says that you're a madman, a maniac, and an utter murderer. However, you're actually a very nice person." "I'm a nice person?" Yang Yi shook his head as he chuckled. "Perhaps only you would say that I'm a nice person. Don't forget that I annihilated your fire spirit race." Fu Jingxian replied, "You're very cruel and insane when you deal with your enemies, and you'll reveal your darkest side when you face your enemies. Moreover, you'll even endlessly magnify the darkness within you when you face your enemies. That's why they call you a maniac and murderer. However, you're very good to the people on your side. There's no killing intent or viciousness coming from you when you face them, and you're very amiable instead. Moreover," Fu Jingxian paused for a moment when she spoke up to this point and said, "I noticed that you've never offended anyone since you arrived at the ancient city of Hallows, and you've even exercised forbearance on many occasions when others offended you. But once you stop exercising forbearance, then you'll annihilate every single enemy of yours and leave no room for reconciliation. The world calls you a maniac, a madman, and a murderer. However, no one has ever wondered why you became like that." Yang Yi glanced at her and didn't want to continue on this topic, so he said, "What did the patriarch of the fire spirit race say when you went to see him?" Fu Jingxian knew how to read the situation, and she didn't continue on the precious topic. She said, "What else? He asked me not to cause trouble in the city because the fire spirit race can't even protect itself now, and it has no choice but to live in the city. So he doesn't want me to cause trouble for them. Haha, they actually intended to lock me up because of that." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "Don't go back and just stay here at Lunar Right Hall." When he spoke up to this point, Yang Yi hesitated for a moment before he withdrew another 1,000-year-old fire crystal and placed it by her bed. He said, "I might have been unable to escape the fire spirit race's territory that day if you hadn't sent me a voice transmission. I won't dissuade you from relying on strength to take revenge, but this is all I can help you with. You're still not ruthless enough." Fu Jingxian gazed at him and said, "I would kill me if I were you, because only my death would guarantee your absolute safety in the city. Conversely, you'll definitely die if I'm allowed to live and expose your true identity." Yang Yi chuckled and said, "As I said before, I don't offend those who don't offend me. I have my own limits, and I absolutely won't go over those limits. I have no reason to kill you, and my conscience wouldn't allow me to do so for those reasons you just spoke of. Moreover, it doesn't conform to my sword Dao. Besides that, I might not die even if you expose me." Yang Yi turned around and left once he finished speaking. Fu Jingxian held the fire crystal in her grasp, and she gazed at the direction Yang Yi left towards for a long time before she finally withdrew her gaze. At the instant she withdrew her gaze, the emotions in her eyes had instantly changed, and it became filled with ferocious, murderous, and vicious. "I'll get stronger no matter the cost." A soft voice resounded through the room. Yang Yi returned to his room after he left Fu Jingxian's room, and the first thing he did was take Manxi's body out of the primordial pagoda. He wasn't interested in corpses, of course. He was interested in the Herculean armor that Manshi wore. He'd personally experienced its strength during the battle, and there were two reasons why he'd been able to pierce through Manshi's eyes. Firstly, Manshi had underestimated him and let his guard down. Secondly, he'd instantly utilized his 11th level sword intent, the third stage of critical strike, and the mortal sword. He could be said to have truly utilized his full strength. But even then, he still felt a trace of obstruction from the armor. In other words, his full strength had still been almost unable to break through the Herculean armor's defenses. Actually, if Manshi was slightly vigilant and had dodged earlier, then it would have been absolutely impossible for him to succeed. In short, if he were to wear the Herculean armor, then he would dare to use only his physical strength, which was covered in dragon scales, to fight half-saints in one-on-one battles. Not to mention that he had the Mageforce shield and the Ice shield. In short, he would be armed to the teeth from now on. A smile couldn't help but arise on the corners of his mouth when he thought about that. However, he had a slight problem. The Herculean armor was wrapped tightly around Manshi, and there were no gaps at all. Most importantly, the hole he'd pierced through it had actually closed up. In other words, he couldn't remove it at all. Xianxia remained silent on the spot for a long time, but it didn't take long for him to have an idea. His figure flashed into the pavilion of alchemy with Manshi's corpse in his hand. "You're so strong, so I'll roast you a little. Let's see if you or the divine flame is stronger." Only a brief moment passed before Xianxia arrived in front of the pill refinement furnace. Xianxia was quite hesitant as he gazed at the flames within the furnace, because the slightest mistake might cause the Herculean armor to be incinerated into ashes. But he had no other choice now. The Herculean armor was extremely strong, and even his full strength could only stab a hole through its thinnest part, but it was utterly impossible for him to remove it. Xianxia was naturally not a fool to toss Manshi's corpse into the furnace. He just moved it slowly towards the divine flame. In the beginning, nothing unusual really happened, but it wasn't long before he felt the Herculean armor wriggling slowly. Xianxia was delighted by this development, and he moved it closed towards the flame. As it grew closer and closer to the flame, the Herculean armor started to wriggle more and more rapidly. Moreover, it wasn't just wriggling. It was even trembling violently, as if it had encountered something which terrified it. It wasn't long before Xianxia sensed that Manshi's corpse, which resided within the Herculean armor, had vanished. It had been completely disintegrated. Xianxia stopped moving the Herculean armor closer to the flame. He gazed at it and spoke seriously. "I know you can hear me. I'll give you one last chance. If you don't submit to me, then I'll toss you into the furnace and incinerate you." Xianxia was very clearly aware that even if a saint-rank treasure hadn't formed a true consciousness of its own, it definitely possessed a certain level of intelligence. He wasn't a member of the Man clan, so he couldn't gain control over it in an ordinary manner. Thus, he had no choice but to threaten it. The Herculean armor showed no response. Xianxia's gaze turned icy cold, and he said, "I'll count to 3. If you still refuse to submit, then I'll let you have a bath in those flames. 1. The Herculean armor still showed no response. 3. As soon as he spoke, Xianxia didn't hesitate to flick with his finger, and the Herculean armor was tossed towards the furnace. Right when it was about to enter, it suddenly exploded apart and transformed into countless streams of dark golden liquid. The liquid instantly arrived before Xianxia and covered him. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief, but it wasn't long before he was filled with shock, because he suddenly felt as if he was being tightly bound by millions of iron threads, and his entire body actually felt like it was about to be torn apart. The Herculean armor was growing tighter on him. Xianxia forced himself to stay calm as he issued a command in his heart, and dragon scales instantly covered his entire body. The tearing pain he felt instantly reduced drastically, and the speed at which the armor constricted had slowed down. However, it wasn't long before the dragon scales started to crack apart. It has intelligence of its own, and such treasures would rarely submit to anyone with ease. I must think of a way to deal with it. Otherwise, if this is allowed to continue, then my body will definitely be cut apart. Xianxia's thoughts surged swiftly as countless different methods flashed through his mind. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. His finger moved slightly, and then a strand of blood essence shot out from the tip of his finger and landed onto the Herculean armor. The blood essence immediately entered the armor upon contact, and then Xianxia noticed that the speed it constricted had slowed down slightly. However, it didn't stop. It's working, but it still hasn't stopped. Was it not sufficient? Xianxia remained in deep thought for a moment before he decided to give it a try, and then another drop of blood essence shot out from his fingertip. Every single time he sent a drop of blood essence forward, Xianxia noticed that the speed it constricted would slow down slightly. However, it still showed no signs of submitting after he sent over a dozen drops of his blood essence into it. On the contrary, it made him feel like it wanted even more. Blood essence was like the essence of a person. Losing too much wasn't just harmful to the body, it even affected one's strength. But Xianxia had no other choice right now, and all he could do was continue. If it was before this, then he could choose to continue threatening it, but how could he do it now? It was wrapped around him, so wasn't the only option to be destroyed with it. After he flicked more than a dozen drops of blood essence to it again, the Herculean armor still didn't show signs of submitting to him, and that instantly infuriated Xianxia, because his cultivation might drop if he gave it more blood essence. Xianxia walked over to the furnace and said, "You'll kill me if this continues, so are you fucking willing to submit or not? If you aren't, then I'll take you down with me." The armor didn't react at all. A savage smile appeared on the corners of Xianxia's mouth as he stretched out his hand towards the edge of the furnace. In an instant, Xianxia's heart shook, and he almost pulled his hand back. He gazed at the divine in flames with shock, because only now had he noticed that it was much more terrifying than he'd imagined. But even if it made his heart tremble, he didn't shrink back at all, and he even moved a little closer. "Are you going to fucking submit or not?" Xianxia roared furiously and seemed as if he was about to do it. Right at this moment, the armor suddenly started wriggling, and it wasn't long before it vanished from Xianxia's body. At the same time, he sensed that there was a connection between him and the armor. He issued a command in his heart, and less than a tenth of an instant passed before the armor instantly covered him. Xianxia finally heaved a sigh of relief. He'd tried it as a last resort, and he never expected that he'd actually succeeded at subduing the Herculean armor. Of course, it was a very dangerous process, because if an ordinary person obtained the Herculean armor, then not to mention making it submit, most wouldn't even be able to endure it even if it was willing to submit. At the moment it covered him, Xianxia knew that an ordinary person would have been instantly transformed into mush. After he retracted the armor, Xianxia started to study its effects. After all, the moment Man's strength had instantly experienced an explosive increase was still vivid in his memory. At that instant, Man's strength had far surpassed his own. Xianxia studied it for a long time before he finally figured it out. When he communicated with the armor, he noticed that so long as he willed it, then an extremely mysterious strand of energy would surge out from the armor and into his right hand. Xianxia felt the surging energy for a while before he suddenly smashed his fist forward. Bang! Space instantly collapsed before his fist, and the formidable force it carried even tore space apart. But it wasn't long before the space there had recovered completely. How formidable! Xianxia has a wisp of excitement in his eyes as he gazed at his fist. At that instant, he'd clearly sensed that his strength had increased by more than 10 times. So, even if a half-saint had taken him by surprise, he was still confident in his ability to blast that half-saint flying with such strength. Most importantly, his own physical defense was extremely terrifying, and he even had the dragon scales. Now, he had the defensive capabilities of the Herculean armor as well. Besides that, he had the Mage Force shield and Ice shield. He dared to fight half-saints without his sword now. Of course, it was only ordinary half-saints, because he wouldn't be able to defeat a half-saint like the Fire Spirit race's patriarch even if he used the sword. Because he'd exhausted too much blood essence while subduing the Herculean armor just now, Xianxia cultivated for an entire day in the primordial pagoda before he left the pagoda. His gains during this trip to the hallowed grounds were great. He hadn't just obtained numerous treasures. He'd even attained the 3rd rank of the monarch realm now. Earlier, while he was recovering from his injuries, the energy from the 1,000-year-old fire crystal he consumed had allowed him to advance a rank. That could be considered to be a pleasant surprise. The important matter at hand is to earn a huge amount of points. If it's possible, it's best to exchange them for a saint rank technique. The Herculean armor was a saint rank treasure, and Yang Yi had experienced its strength. So, he knew that a technique which was similarly at the saint rank would definitely not be weak. Moreover, techniques were his weak points because he only had 2 sword techniques. Of course, most importantly, he had to earn points in order to enter the pagoda of confinement to retrieve the sword precursor. Time passed very quickly, and it was time to meet Nether Maiden. She arrived at Lunar Right Hall and moved unobstructed throughout Lunar Right Hall. It wasn't that its members hadn't noticed her, but they didn't dare step forward even if they did. Not to mention Lunar Right Hall, besides a few specific places, there was no place within the ancient city of Hallows that Nether Maiden didn't dare enter. Moreover, besides a few people, no one else dared to stop her. There was once a clan who refused to give her face. That clan wasn't destroyed, and only its patriarch was killed. Moreover, so long as that clan had a new patriarch, that patriarch would be killed on the next day. Even if that patriarch was a half-saint, that clan naturally refused to let the matter go and wanted to take revenge, but even more died instead. In the end, it had no choice but to seek help from the Hallowed Halls. However, the Hallowed Halls said that it didn't have the right to interfere in Nether Maiden's business. From that day onward, no other clan or power dared to not give Nether Maiden face. Even the extraordinary clans that had been passed down for 100,000 years in the city were no exception. They still acted respectfully when facing Nether Maiden. She was both mysterious and formidable. The 3rd rank of the monarch realm. Your strength has improved again. In his room, Nether Maiden floated over to Yang Yi. Yang Yi nodded and said, "I'm still far inferior to you. There's no need to be modest. You aren't weak at all," said Nether Maiden. Yang Yi grinned and said, "Actually, I'm very curious. Exactly what mission would make someone of your strength feel that it's difficult?" She replied, 9 stone coffins have appeared deep within the Netherworld ocean. Many geniuses of the hallowed grounds who ventured there died mysterious deaths. Our mission is to investigate the reason or bring those stone coffins back. Yang Yi suddenly asked, "The hallowed grounds has numerous experts. Why don't they do it?" The Netherworld ocean belongs to the oceanic clans, and the relationship between the oceanic clans and the human race was terrible all those years ago. So, the oceanic saint placed a formation in their territory. All humans at the half-saint realm and above would be suppressed upon entering their territory, and only 50% of their strength would remain. Moreover, the oceanic saint left a strand of his soul behind. If half-saints of the human race dare to step foot into their territory, then that strand of his soul would show itself, and it would either repulse or kill them, said Nether Maiden. Yang Yi nodded and said, "Those stone coffins feel dangerous to you?" Nether Maiden said, "There are 9 stone puppets standing on guard by the side of those stone coffins, and I need someone to keep them busy. How strong are they?" Yang Yi had a bad feeling. They're half-saints. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched violently as he said, "You want me to keep 9 half-saints busy on my own? Aren't you thinking a little too highly of me?" What was it like to fight 9 half-saints? Even with Yang Ye's current strength, he was barely able to fight a single half-saint without using his sword, and he didn't even know if he could defeat that half-saint. Conversely, he would be quite confident at defeating a half-saint if he could use his sword. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to win against the joint forces of 9 half-saints, and it was impossible even if he used the Stone of Suppression. She replied, "I didn't ask you to do it alone. You've asked for the help of others as well?" "Of course," she continued, "while your strength isn't bad, it's impossible for you to fight 9 half-saints on your own." Yang Yi heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that, and then he asked, "How many others?" 2. Yang Yi was speechless. "Come, they're here." Nether Maiden's figure flashed and transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Should I go or not? Xianxia hesitated for an instant before he decided that he would. After all, if Nether Maiden didn't have something wrong with her in the head, then it was naturally impossible for her to do something that would give her life away. Since she dared to head out on this mission while only getting the help of 3 people, then she was definitely confident in the group's ability. Moreover, he would get 100,000 points at least if they succeeded. When he stepped out of Lunar Right Hall, Xianxia saw the other 2 people whom Nether Maiden had invited. It was a pair of a man and a woman. The man wore a moon-white robe, was handsome, and had a faint smile on his face. Moreover, he emanated a very comfortable aura that caused others to be unable to help but get close to him. On the other hand, the woman wore a green dress and had a slim figure. But her appearance couldn't be said to be very beautiful, and it could only be described as not ugly. They seemed quite ordinary, but Xianxia knew that they weren't simple. After all, how could they be simple if Nether Maiden had invited them to join her on this mission? Nether Maiden pointed at the pair and said, "Wang Yan, Qing Ming." The 2 of them nodded to Xianxia, and Xianxia returned the gesture and said, "Young man." Just like that, the 4 of them set out from Lunar Right Hall. Nether Maiden didn't tell him about their background, and she didn't explain Xianxia's background to them as well. However, both Xianxia and the 2 of them didn't inquire about each other. The Man Clan. Elder Man. Young Man has left the city. A black-robed man stood before Man Yuan and spoke respectfully. Man Yuan, who was meditating there, suddenly opened his eyes. He was about to stand up when the black-robed man continued. However, he left with Nether Maiden, and another man and woman. Nether Maiden? Man Yuan's eyes twitched. He hesitated for a moment and didn't get up in the end. All those years ago, Nether Maiden had caused an ancient clan like the He clan to suffer a heavy blow. Even though the Man clan was slightly stronger than the He clan, it absolutely couldn't endure Nether Maiden's wrath. Moreover, she had an extremely mysterious background that even the hallowed halls feared, let alone their tiny Man clan. Man, she has to be avenged no matter what, and the Herculean armor has to be taken back. You can leave. I'll deal with it myself. Man Yuan vanished from the room once he finished speaking. Xianxia had quite a headache after flying for an hour. Nether Maiden was too quick. How quick was she? She was as fast as the speed of sound. Moreover, it was Xianxia's weakest point. Fortunately, he was barely able to keep up with her when he used his full strength. However, Xianxia was very well aware that Nether Maiden had probably slowed down. Otherwise, he would probably be unable to keep up with her even if he utilized Horizon Warp. Xianxia noticed that Wang Yan and Qing Ming weren't ordinary as well, because while they weren't as quick as Nether Maiden, they were following closely behind her. Moreover, it seemed like they hadn't used their full strength. In any case, Xianxia was right at the back. After an entire day and night of flying, the 4 of them finally arrived before an ancient city. Nether Maiden pointed at the city and said, "That city is called Nameless, and there are all sorts of forces and existences hidden within it. Strength is the only law in the city." When she spoke up to this point, she turned around to gaze at Xianxia. "It'll be quite troublesome if you cause trouble here, so don't go around on your own and stay with me. All right?" Xianxia's face darkened as he said, "Do I seem like someone who causes a lot of trouble?" She replied, "I'm worried that others would offend you." Xianxia was speechless. Wang Yan and Qing Ming glanced at Xianxia with surprise when they heard her, because they were naturally able to discern what she meant, and that was exactly why they were surprised. Because she clearly meant that Xianxia was very dangerous. However, that fellow who stood before them felt very ordinary to them. Nether Maiden didn't lead them straight into the city through the air, and she walked towards it instead. The entrance wasn't guarded, but a chubby middle-aged man with a bared upper body obstructed their path when they were about to enter the city. Entrance fee. Entrance fee. Pay with your lives if you don't have enough. The middle-aged man stretched out his meaty right hand and smiled with greed. Nether Maiden flicked her finger, and an extreme-grade energy stone flew over to the chubby man. The middle-aged man's eyes opened wide when he saw it, and it was even to the extent that a trace of saliva flowed down from the corner of his mouth. He glanced at Nether Maiden's group out of the corner of his eye, and he noticed that the woman who led the group was merely at the Exalt realm, while the strongest amongst the rest was only at the 5th rank of the Monarch realm. So, he hurriedly put the energy stone away, and then he stretched out his hand towards Nether Maiden again and said, "Entrance fee! Entrance fee. Pay with your lives if you don't have enough. Then we'll use your life." As soon as Nether Maiden finished speaking, the middle-aged man's head suddenly flew up into the air. Yang Yi shook his head. People always die because of their greed and foolishness. After all, Nether Maiden's dressing clearly showed that she wasn't someone to be trifled with. However, the middle-aged man asked for even more in payment, so it was truly impossible for him to avoid death. "Who the fuck dares to kill on my territory? Are you tired of living?" A furious roar resounded, and then a man with a scorpion tattoo on his face led a group towards Yang Yi and the others. The man was furious when he saw the chubby middle-aged man's corpse on the ground, and he pointed his saber at Nether Maiden. "Bitch! Don't you know the rules that I, Lord Biao, set in my territory? Trust me. I'll make them take turns on you today." He's finished. This time, it wasn't just Yang Yi who shook his head. Even Wang Yan and Qing Ming shook their heads as well, because that fellow wouldn't be able to live no matter how many lives he had. The punishment of insolence is death. As soon as Nether Maiden spoke, she raised her hand slowly. Suddenly, an anxious voice resounded. "Your Highness, please show mercy." However, Nether Maiden's hand didn't stop at all. She just waved it lightly, and then a ray of white light flashed before the man's head flew up into the air. Nether Maiden was so quick that only Yang Yi and the others could see her movements clearly. So, the people behind the man were stunned when his head flew into the air. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man who had a very similar appearance to the man arrived here. He instantly clenched his fists when he saw the man's body, and a strand of viciousness even appeared on his face. However, Nether Maiden paid no attention to him and just led Yang Yi and the others into the city. "Your Highness, do you intend to leave just like that?" The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice. She stopped and said, "Do you really want me to stay?" His face twitched violently, and a short while passed before he took a deep breath and said, "Your Highness, please do as you please." The middle-aged man's face was horrifyingly gloomy as he watched Nether Maiden leave, but he didn't dare ask her to stay. Yang Ye's brows were gradually pressed together as they moved through the city, because it was truly too chaotic. They constantly saw people dying on the streets, and there were even some who'd targeted their group during this period. However, no one dared to charge over and just stared fixedly at them, because they who lived lives that were filled with danger were instinctively capable of sensing if someone was dangerous. Meanwhile, the white-robed man suddenly asked, "Your Highness, may I know why we're here?" Yang Yi and Qing Ming gazed at Nether Maiden as well because they were very curious as well. She replied, "To meet a divine talisman master in order to borrow some things for our protection." A divine talisman master. Yang Ye's heart shook. He hadn't expected that a divine talisman master of legend would actually exist here. After all, he was a talisman master as well, so he knew what the title of divine talisman master meant. That was a terrifying existence who could use the world to craft talismans. It wasn't just Yang Yi. Even Wang Yan and Qing Ming were shocked. Wang Yan said, "Your Highness, our hallowed halls has a divine talisman master?" She shook her head and replied, "It didn't. In short, he's the only divine talisman master in this world. He doesn't really like coming into contact with others. So wait here for me." As soon as she finished speaking, she took another glance at Yang Yi and said, "The relationships between the powers here are very complicated, and there are countless half-saints here. Don't do anything impulsive." She vanished on the spot once she finished speaking. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. "I'm going to walk around." Wang Yan vanished towards the distance once he finished speaking. On the other hand, Qing Ming didn't even speak a word before she vanished. Yang Yi shrugged, glanced at the surroundings, and noticed that a nearby street was quite bustling with noise, because there were some people who'd set up stalls on the ground there. His boredom and curiosity urged him forward. After walking for a while, Yang Yi suddenly stopped before the stall of an old man. There was only a single black sword chest there, but a portion of it seemed to have been sliced off, so there was a hole on it. Xianxia gazed carefully at it for some time and was just about to touch it when an invisible force enveloped him. Xianxia stopped and gazed at the old man, and the old man spoke coldly. "You can only look, not touch. A half-saint?" Xianxia hadn't expected that the old man would actually be a half-saint. "Looks like Nether Maiden didn't lie to me. This place really is filled with experts." Xianxia nodded and pulled his hand back before he said, "What's its price?" The old man spoke indifferently. 100,000 points from the hallowed halls or 300,000 top-grade energy stones. Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "Let's be honest with each other. That's not bad. But even you can see that it's damaged and isn't worth such a price. I'll give you 2,000 extreme-grade energy stones. I'll take it if you agree." "You have extreme-grade energy stones?" The old man was astounded. Usually, a single extreme-grade energy stone could be exchanged for 100 top-grade energy stones. But it was practically impossible to actually exchange. Unless it was a power that ran businesses, otherwise very few would be willing to make such an exchange. So, the true exchange rate of extreme-grade energy stones was far more than that. Xianxia nodded and said, "I don't like bargaining. We can make the exchange if you agree." The old man hesitated for a moment. However, a voice suddenly resounded when he was just about to nod with agreement. "I'll pay 2,100 extreme-grade energy stones." Xianxia and the old man looked over towards the source of the voice, and they saw a middle-aged man walking over slowly. Xianxia frowned when he saw the middle-aged man because it was the man who'd almost entered into conflict with Nether Maiden at the entrance to the city. Xianxia withdrew his gaze and said, 2,500. The old man was overjoyed, and he was just about to nod when the middle-aged man said, 3,000. He even glanced intentionally at Xianxia while he spoke. Xianxia turned around and gazed at the middle-aged man, and flames of rage burned in his eyes as he said, "I'll pay 5,000. The middle-aged man grunted coldly and said, 6,000. 7,000. Xianxia stared fixedly at the middle-aged man while his face flushed red, and his chest was even rising and falling rapidly. He seemed like he intended to fight the middle-aged man until the end. The old man was smiling from ear to ear. 8,000. The middle-aged man even glanced provocatively at Xianxia once he finished speaking. Right when the old man thought that Xianxia would increase the price to 9,000. Xianxia shrugged and spoke indifferently, "Congratulations, you've won." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia turned around and walked away. The middle-aged man's face instantly darkened. "Stop right there," he suddenly roared furiously. Xianxia stopped, turned around, and gazed at the middle-aged man as he said, "Nether Maiden bullied you, yet you didn't dare to look for trouble with her and have come to look for trouble with me. Do I seem easy to bully because I look ordinary? How dare you play tricks on me?" The middle-aged man stared fixedly at Xianxia while the killing intent in his eyes wasn't concealed at all. Xianxia laughed with ridicule. "You're blaming me for your own stupidity? You're courting death." He was just about to attack when the old man stopped him and said, "I don't want to interfere in the matters between the two of you. Since you made a bid for 8,000, then pay up." "I don't want it." The middle-aged man glanced coldly at the old man. "What a joke. That's only worth 2,000 extreme-grade energy stones. But he wants me to pay 8,000? Does he think I'm a fool? Do you think that I'm easy to bully?" The old man's face turned gloomy. The middle-aged man revealed disdain as he said, "Old man, don't think that you're amazing because you're a half-saint. I'm from the Endless Alliance. Do you dare to do anything to me?" The Endless Alliance. The spectators instantly gasped when they heard these words, and many even turned around and left right away. There were 4 great powers in Nameless City. The strongest was the city governor's estate, and the others were the Endless Alliance, the Assassin's Alliance, and the Divine Talisman Association. They'd split the entire city into 4 amongst themselves. Of course, these were just the powers that were out in the open. There were many other hidden powers throughout the city. However, they kept a comparatively low profile. In the eyes of independent cultivators or those without any background, the members of these powers couldn't be offended at all. because they didn't just have numerous members, they were very strong as well. A single half-saint was completely insufficient to face any one of those four great powers. Sure enough, the old man's expression turned unsightly when he heard the middle-aged man. A short while passed before he suddenly gazed at Yang Yi and said, "Since he doesn't want it, then it's yours. I'll give you a discount. You just have to pay 6,000 extreme-grade energy stones." A wisp of complacency arose on the middle-aged man's mouth, and then he gazed at Yang Yi while taking pleasure in Yang Ye's misfortune. Yang Yi, who'd intended to watch the show, was stunned. He hadn't expected that the old man would actually act like this. Clearly, the old man thought that he was a ripe persimmon who could be squashed with ease. "You think that I'm easy to bully?" Yang Yi gazed at the old man as he spoke. The old man glanced at Yang Yi and spoke indifferently. "Since he doesn't want it, then it's naturally yours. You made a bid of 7,000 just now. I didn't force you to do anything. Moreover, young man, don't blame me for not warning you. If you refuse, then I'll treat it as you were playing tricks on me, and you'll have to pay for doing that." Yang Yi nodded and said, "So you intend to be unreasonable, huh?" The old man's imposing aura suddenly erupted from him and enveloped down upon Yang Yi. And then he spoke gloomily, "Young man, this is your final chance, or you'll have to suffer the consequences." Yang Yi understood that the old man clearly intended to bully him. So he didn't waste his breath again. The Herculean armor instantly appeared on him, and then he smashed his fist forward. The old man's expression changed. He hadn't expected that this fellow who was merely at the monarch realm would actually dare to attack him, and he'd never imagined that Yang Ye's speed would actually be so quick. So he had no choice but to raise his fist and smash it against Yang Ye's fist. The old man's expression instantly changed drastically when their fists were about to come into contact, and he wanted to withdraw his hand. But it was too late. Bang! The spectators watched with astonishment as the old man's figure was blasted flying, and they even faintly heard cracking. A monarch realm expert punched a half-saint flying? All of them were dumbstruck, and they gazed at Yang Yi with disbelief. Even the middle-aged man was stunned right now. He hadn't expected that this fellow before him had actually been able to blast a half-saint flying with a single punch. Was he feigning weakness? No matter what it was, the middle-aged man had the intention to withdraw. The reason he'd looked for trouble with Yang Yi just now was mainly because of Nether Maiden. She'd killed his younger brother, so he was naturally filled with resentment. However, he was clearly aware of Nether Maiden's identity and strength. Not to mention him, even the alliance that backed him might not dare to look for trouble with Nether Maiden. So he had no choice but to exercise forbearance. However, he wasn't able to stop himself when he saw Yang Yi. Why? Because Yang Yi was only at the monarch realm, and Nether Maiden wasn't by his side. But now he knew that he was mistaken. How could someone who was by Nether Maiden's side be weak? But isn't it a bit too crazy to be able to punch a half-saint away? Yang Yi stretched out his hand and gestured, and then the sword chest flew over into his grasp. Yang Yi shook his head as he gazed at it, and he said, "I intended to pay for it, but you didn't want it and insisted on giving it to me for free. I can only say that you're truly a good person. You." Meanwhile, the old man almost spat out a mouthful of blood from the rage he experienced. He glared angrily at Yang Yi while his right hand trembled slightly, but he didn't dare to attack. He wasn't a fool. Since Yang Yi could punch him flying, then both Yang Ye's background and backing would definitely be extremely terrifying. The slightest mistake might result in his death. Yang Yi glanced coldly at the old man and said, "What? You intend to give me more?" The old man stared fixedly at Yang Yi, but he didn't speak another word. He just turned around and left. He accepted his fate this time. While he'd suffered some injuries from the previous collision, he knew that it had been caused by his carelessness, and he was confident in his ability to defeat Yang Yi if he acted against Yang Yi. However, he didn't because he didn't want to face the wrath of the power that backed Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't pursue the old man. Even though he'd relied on the Herculean armor to take the old man by surprise and blast him flying, Yang Yi knew that he couldn't kill a half-saint. So it would be a waste of time to pursue the old man. After he put the sword chest away, Yang Yi turned around with the intention of leaving. He hadn't looked for trouble with the middle-aged man because he'd given it some thought, and he felt that it was better to just avoid such trouble. The middle-aged man was stunned. He isn't going to look for trouble with me? He's just leaving? Suddenly, a group walked over from afar. Move aside. The Endless Alliance has business here. If I see any unfamiliar faces after 10 breaths of time, then don't blame me, Chan Badeo, for showing no mercy. The man who led the group roared furiously while he held a saber in his hand, and the crowd that was watching the show instantly vanished without a trace. Chan Badeo? The middle-aged man was slightly stunned, and then he hurriedly walked over and said, Badeo, what are you doing here? Zhang Liao, some brothers said that your younger brother was killed. Fuck. Who the fuck dared to kill a member of our Endless Alliance on our own territory? I've brought a group of brothers to take revenge. Chun Badeo glanced at the surroundings and said, Who did it? I'm going to slice him into pieces. Zhang Liao shook his head and said, Forget it. He was very well aware of how terrifying Nether Maiden was. Not to mention his younger brother. Even if the Alliance leader's younger brother was killed, the Alliance leader would still have no choice but to exercise forbearance. How can you just let it go? Chun Badeo roared furiously and said, Killing a member of our Alliance in our own territory isn't just an insult to us. It's an insult to our Endless Alliance. We would be ridiculed if news of it were to spread. So, it's not your problem, it's our Alliance's problem. Zhang Liao shook his head and was about to speak. However, a young man by Chun Badeo's side suddenly pointed at Yang Yi and said, Guardian Chan, he's one of the fellows who killed Zhang Liao's younger brother. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. Chun Badeo gazed at Yang Yi and roared furiously, Stop him! The group behind him flashed forward and instantly surrounded Yang Yi. Zhang Liao hurriedly said, Badeo, listen to me. Just let it go. Even though he didn't know who Yang Yi was, Yang Yi could punch a half-saint flying. So, how could Yang Yi be an ordinary person? Moreover, he was in the same group as Nether Maiden. At this moment, he was quite regretful. He regretted being unable to control himself and looking for trouble with Yang Yi. What nonsense! Chun Badeo glared furiously at Zhang Liao and said, Zhang Liao, have you lost your balls? They killed your younger brother, yet you're actually protecting him? Have you thought about your younger brother? Would he be able to rest in peace? Zhang Liao fell silent, and a wisp of viciousness gradually appeared in his eyes when he thought about the miserable death of his younger brother. Chun Badeo continued, Isn't it just his background being slightly unordinary? What are you afraid of? I'll be there to support you no matter what happens. And if I can't, then we still have a myriad of other brothers in the Alliance. When he spoke up to this point, Chun Badeo walked over to Yang Yi and said, Kid, no matter who you are, you have to pay for killing a member of my Endless Alliance. I'll chop you up into 1,000 pieces today, and I'll let the world know that not just anyone can bully members of my Alliance. Yang Yi shrugged and said, I didn't kill his younger brother. You've got the wrong person. You can ask that fellow if you don't believe me. Ask him if I killed his younger brother. Chun Badeo turned around to gaze at Zhang Liao. Meanwhile, the young man who spoke before said, He didn't kill Zhang Biao, and it was a woman who did it. But he was in the same group as her. Chun Badan gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi nodded and said, Actually, he's right. We really are in the same group for now. But there's a person responsible for everything. She killed his younger brother, so you should look for her. Right? Your death can be considered as vengeance for my younger brother. Meanwhile, Zhang Liao suddenly spoke ferociously. He was very well aware that it was impossible to seek revenge from Nether Maiden. Since that was the case, then he could only seek vengeance from Yang Yi. Because no matter how great Yang Ye's background was, it was impossible to compare to Nether Maiden. Yang Yi was furious when he heard this, and he said, Do you really think I'm that easy to bully? So you're doing it as much as you can? Meanwhile, Chun Badeo suddenly moved his wrist and pointed his saber at Yang Yi. He roared furiously, I'm bullying you right now. What the fuck are you going to do about it? Chun Badeo had just finished speaking when his eyes instantly opened wide, and they almost popped out from their sockets. because a hand was on his neck. The others here watched this scene with disbelief. Xianxia choked Chen Bideo while a smile arose on the corners of his mouth. How are you going to bully me when you're so weak? Besides ferocity, there was also terror in Chen Bideo's eyes. He was at the 5th rank of the monarch realm, but he hadn't even been able to see Xianxia's actions clearly. My God, is he a half-saint? You dare to kill a member of my endless alliance? You're dead. Zhang Liao roared furiously. Crack. The clear and melodious sound of bones cracking resounded. And then Chen Bideo's head tilted to the side as he'd lost his life. Xianxia withdrew his hand and glanced indifferently at Zhang Liao. I don't know if I'll die, but I know that you didn't cherish the chance to live. Then I'll give you death. As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's figure moved and instantly arrived in front of Zhang Liao, and then he smashed his right fist towards Zhang Liao. The latter's expression changed drastically, and he pressed his palms forward to collide with Xianxia's attack. Bang! Zhang Liao was blasted flying, and he crashed through 5 houses before his figure finally stopped. He was dead, instantly killed by a single punch. The other members of the Endless Alliance were horrified, and they didn't hesitate at all to turn around and flee. What a joke! Why was killing Monarch Realm experts like he was slaughtering sheep. How could they dare to attack him? Xianxia clapped his hands together, and then he turned around and returned to where he stood before. After that, he withdrew the damaged sword chest. The sword chest was pitch black, and it was densely covered by strange symbols. Besides that, there was a small corner missing from the top of it, causing it to seem quite ugly. The effects of swords' chests were usually to form sword formations or enhance the might of the swords within it. The reason Xianxia took a liking to this sword chest was mainly because of a feeling, and once he looked at it carefully, he noticed that it really was quite extraordinary. Not to mention anything else, just the hardness of the materials used to forge, it was much better than ordinary Dao rank treasures. Besides that, there were talismans inscribed on it. Even though he'd practiced the Dao of talismans in the past, he could only be considered to be slightly knowledgeable in the field. So, he wasn't able to figure out the effects of the talismans on the sword chest. However, his intuition told him that it wasn't ordinary. Coupled with the fact that 2,000 extreme-grade energy stones weren't a huge amount for him, he intended to buy it. But he hadn't expected that he would obtain it for free in the end. Big brother, give me a little money, all right? Right when Xianxia was carefully observing the sword chest, a clear, melodious, and slightly weak voice appeared from behind him. This caused Xianxia's pupils to constrict slightly while a chill ran down his spine. Danger! Extreme danger! It wasn't Xianxia's intuition but a warning from the primordial pagoda. It was the first time that the primordial pagoda had warned him that he was in danger. The profound energy within him surged madly while dragon scales appeared beneath his clothes. Xianxia turned around slowly, and he saw a young girl looking at him with a pitiable expression on his face. The young girl was around 10 years old. Her clothes were in rags, her hair completely dirty, and her face was even covered in a huge amount of mud. Most importantly, she had no hands. Both her sleeves were empty. He wasn't able to discern her cultivation. She was a completely ordinary little girl. However, Xianxia was very clearly aware that it wasn't that simple at all. Not to mention the warning he got from the primordial pagoda. He hadn't even noticed when she arrived behind him. Moreover, his divine sense was still unable to sense her until now. Xianxia was shocked in his heart because even a half-saint couldn't arrive behind him without him noticing, let alone make the primordial pagoda send him a warning. Big brother, give me a little money, all right? She gazed at Xianxia while speaking in a weak and gentle voice, and she seemed so frail that she couldn't even resist a gust of wind. Xianxia hesitated for a moment before he withdrew an extreme-grade energy stone and placed it on the ground. She glanced at the energy stone and said, "It's too little. It won't be able to satiate Inin's hunger." Xianxia withdrew 10 more extreme-grade energy stones and placed them on the ground. The little girl shook her head and said, "It isn't enough." The corners of Xianxia's mouth twitched. This time, he withdrew 100 energy stones. She still shook her head again. Xianxia took a deep breath, withdrew 1,000 extreme-grade energy stones, and then spoke gently. Little sister, it isn't easy for me to earn money as well. Of course, it's definitely more difficult for you. Since it's difficult for both of us, then let's not make it difficult for each other, alright? At this moment, Xianxia's heart was bleeding. It was the first time he'd been extorted in his entire life. He wanted to give her nothing, but he decided to give it to her in the end. It was none other than because the primordial pagoda had sent him a warning. That meant that the young girl who stood before him was definitely extremely terrifying. After all, the primordial pagoda hadn't sent him a warning when he faced Lu Yen that day. Moreover, the little girl had actually been able to live in Nameless City, so it was obvious that she wasn't ordinary. He was paying to avoid a calamity. In Xianxia's opinion, if he could use money to deal with it, then it was best to not draw his sword. Of course, the precondition was that he couldn't defeat the other person. The little girl blinked and said, "Big brother, give me 5,000, alright? Are you a glutton?" Xianxia's face was dark, and he was almost about to shake his head. However, he didn't in the end, because the primordial pagoda gave him another warning. It wasn't just the primordial pagoda, even the violet mink sent him a warning. Xianxia knew that it was a severe situation. He checked his possessions and noticed that he only had 10,000 extreme-grade energy stones left. This time, while it hurt, he didn't hesitate to withdraw another 4,000 extreme-grade energy stones. He placed it on the ground before him and said, "Here, it's all for you." A faint smile arose on the corners of her mouth when she saw the small hill of energy stones. Suddenly, her brows knit together slightly as she said, "Big brother, there are too many. I can't hold them all." "That's not a problem." He'd given her 5,000 extreme-grade energy stones, so what was a single spatial ring? Xianxia withdrew a spatial ring, placed all the energy stones into it, and then said, "See, isn't it all right now?" She replied, "But Inin doesn't have any hands." "That's not a problem as well." Xianxia withdrew a red string and stringed the spatial ring before he said, "Wear it around your neck." She blinked and said, "Big brother, I don't have hands. Help me put it on." "Alright." Xianxia was at a loss for words. The current state of his emotions was truly impossible to describe with words. Not only was he being extorted, he even had to serve his extortionist. That was truly unprecedented for him. Xianxia was quite hesitant. She was a dangerous person, and he had no doubt about it. So, he'd constantly kept his distance from her because he was worried that something would suddenly occur. Yet now, if he were to help her put it on, then it meant that he had to get close to her. At such a close distance. The little girl blinked as she spoke. "Big brother, come on." Xianxia laughed bitterly and shook his head. "I'm really such a fool. Even an attack with the full strength of a half-saint wouldn't be able to kill me with the defensive capabilities of my body while it's covered in my dragon scales. Even if she does attack me, would she be able to kill me? Unless she's a Saint Realm expert, of course. But if she was a Saint Realm expert, then all he could do was accept his fate." Xianxia stopped hesitating. He walked over to her and then he placed the strong around her neck. "Big brother, you're a really good person," said the young girl. Xianxia's hand froze a little. "I used 5,000 extreme energy stones to be called a good person." Xianxia shook his head, and then he secured the string around her neck. Meanwhile, she said, "You're very generous as well. You didn't just give Inin money, you gave Inin so much. Inin can eat for quite a few days now. You aren't like the others who don't just refuse to give me money. They even intend to hit me. Even if they did give me money, they would be stingy, and Inin would still feel hungry." Xianxia felt quite amused when he heard her, and then he asked casually, "What do you do if they refuse and even hit you?" "I eat them." Inin raised her head, gazed at Xianxia, and spoke in a melodious voice. Xianxia's face froze. A short while passed before he gulped down a mouthful of saliva and said, "You really are them?" Inin nodded and said, "Yes. Unfortunately, they weren't tasty." When she spoke up to this point, she suddenly moved closer to Xianxia, and then she sniffed him lightly while a wisp of greed appeared in her eyes. She said, "Big brother, I feel that your flesh will be much tastier than them, right? But your skin is slightly thick, and it's even thicker than those old geezers who call themselves half-saints. But it's fine because my teeth are very strong. I'll be able to bite through it." Yang Yi's hairs stood on end while cold sweat appeared on his face. She ate them, and there were even half-saints. Moreover, she sounds like she ate more than one. Yang Yi knew that he'd encountered a true monster. Yang Yi lowered his head to look at her, and then he forced a smile on his face as he said, "You won't eat me, right?" She replied, "I wanted to." Yang Yi was at a loss for words. She continued, "However, Big Brother is unlike the others. You didn't scold me or hit me, and you even gave me things. So I won't eat you. Big Brother, I'm leaving. See you." She turned around and walked away while she spoke. Meanwhile, a group led by a man in a gorgeous robe walked swiftly towards Yang Yi. The strength of this group was very formidable, and their speed was extremely swift as well. Even though they were walking, they were even faster than a dashing horse. It didn't take long for the group to be on the verge of colliding with the young girl. Yang Ye's expression changed, and he was just about to act. However, what he witnessed next caused him to be stunned and petrified on the spot. The young girl was still walking, and the group didn't stop as well. Just like that, they grew closer and closer, and it wasn't long before they arrived right before the young girl. But there was a problem. The young girl was still walking forward. Suddenly, she appeared behind the group, and then she continued walking slowly towards the distance, while the group arrived in front of Yang Yi. The man who led the group gazed at Yang Yi as he asked in a deep voice, "I'm the vice leader of the Endless Alliance, Ning Jun. You killed Chun Badeo and Zhang Liao." Yang Yi pointed at the young girl in the distance, and then he gazed at Ning Jun and said, You can't see that young girl." "What young girl?" Ning Jun looked towards the direction Yang Yi pointed at, and there was no one there. Ning Jun's face fell. He turned around, gazed at Yang Yi and said, "Are you trying to play tricks on me? You're a half-saint. Can you really not see her?" Yang Yi asked once more with a slightly trembling voice. Ning Jun's face became completely gloomy as he said, "Kid, there's nothing besides air there. Have you gone mad?" Yang Yi gazed at the young girl in the distance who was still walking, and he wiped the cold sweat on his face as he muttered, "Did I just see a ghost?" The young girl was clearly right there, but they couldn't see her. Why am I able to see her? But why isn't this fellow Ning Jun, who's a half-saint, able to as well? Yang Yi was very puzzled. Meanwhile, Ning Jun asked once more, "You killed those members of my Endless Alliance, right?" Yang Yi nodded and said, "I killed too. Give me a reason not to kill you." Ning Jun spoke in a low voice. "You can give it a try if you have the ability." Right at this moment, the voice of a woman resounded. Ning Jun's expression changed as he turned around to look, and he saw a woman floating over from afar. It was Nether Maiden. Ning Jun frowned when he saw her. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and he immediately revealed shock in his eyes as he said, You're Nether Maiden. I killed members of your Endless Alliance as well. Do you want to kill me as well?" said Nether Maiden. Ning Jun's face fell and he said, "Your Highness, Nether Maiden, there's no enmity between my alliance and you, so may I know why you've killed members of my alliance? They deserved death." Nether Maiden didn't provide much of an explanation. "Attack if you want to avenge them. Aren't you going a little too far?" Ning Jun's face was gloomy. This time, Nether Maiden paid no further attention to him. She just gazed at Yang Yi and said, "Let's go." She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yang Yi shook his head as he suppressed the shock and bewilderment in his heart, and he followed behind her. In the end, Ning Jun didn't attack. He just led the group away instead. "You caused trouble again," Nether Maiden spoke as they walked. Yang Yi replied, "Would you believe me if I said that I wasn't the one who started it?" She nodded. "I would." "Ha!" Yang Yi was slightly astounded. "You really believe me?" She nodded in response. "Why?" asked Xianxia. She stopped moving, fell silent for a while and then said, I wouldn't have invited you if you were one who liked to create trouble. Killing is unavoidable in this world because there are always incidents where others would refuse to let you go. Just like what happened at the entrance of the city. So, killing is a very ordinary thing. However, I don't like those people who intentionally create trouble. Xianxia glanced at her and said, You've really made me feel quite surprised. She replied, You too. Both of their words carried hidden meanings behind them. Nether Maiden suddenly said, We have to stay here for a night. Why? She answered, That divine talisman master doesn't have what I need for now. So he asked me to wait one night. We aren't leaving the city tonight. You must be cautious while residing within the city. I know you're very strong, and you're even capable of fighting half-saints. However, there are many things here that exceed the scope of your understanding. Xianxia nodded as he deeply agreed. After all, Yinyin might not be a half-saint, but she was even more terrifying than a half-saint. Xianxia suddenly said, Right, what about Wang Yan and Qing Ming? Will they be fine? She replied, It's fine. Even if they do encounter any danger, their strengths are more than enough to protect themselves. Moreover, they're comparatively amiable people, and they don't take pleasure in fighting and killing. Xianxia was speechless. Nether Maiden said, The difference between you and them is that they know when to stop, but you don't. Moreover, you'd even kill with all your might. So, they're able to leave safely even if they encounter any problems, but you would make a small problem become a huge problem instead. You have to do something about your temper. Xianxia smiled and said, Thank you for the warning. She stopped moving, and then gazed at a tower in front of her and said, We'll stay here tonight. Xianxia raised his head to look over, and he noticed that the tower had over 10 levels, and there were 3 words inscribed there, Tower of Buddha. Let's go. Nether Maiden walked in, and then Xianxia followed right after her. There was a stone counter not too far from the entrance, and an old man with snow-white hair was seated behind it. The old man was resting on a chair with his eyes slightly closed, and he seemed like he was sleeping. The entrance fee is 10 extreme-grade energy stones. The cultivation rooms on the 2nd floor cost 200. The 3rd floor is 300. The 9th floor is 900. The old man didn't even open his eyes as he spoke. Nether Maiden flicked her finger, and then 180 extreme-grade energy stones flew onto the counter. The old man finally opened his eyes, and then he tossed 2 golden keys towards Xianxia and Nether Maiden. The room numbers are written on them. Just enter the corresponding room. Nether Maiden took the key, and then she led Xianxia up the tower. What exactly is this city? Xianxia asked as they walked towards their rooms. The first impression he had was that the city was chaotic, and the second thing he felt was that it was mysterious. Everything here was mysterious. It's heaven for many because there's no order or rules here. You can do as you please if you have the strength. Even though there are powers here, it's very normal for the powers here to rise and fall. For example, Endless Alliance didn't exist a month ago, said Nether Maiden. Does the Hallowed Halls not manage this place? Asked Xianxia. She replied, It's not that it doesn't want to, but it can't. Xiangxia's eyelids twitched, and he said, Even the Hallowed Halls can't? The Hallowed Halls was a power that represented the human race in the hallowed grounds. While the ancient city of Hallows had many powers within it, they were all within the Hallowed Halls management. Of course, many elders and figures who possessed authority in the Hallowed Halls came from those extraordinary clans and powers. However, he had no doubt that the Hallowed Halls far surpassed the clans and powers, because it had its Hallowed Lord and 2 supreme exalts. Especially the Hallowed Lord, he was the #1 expert in the hallowed grounds. So all races had to obey the orders of the Hallowed Halls. The Hallowed Halls was the strongest power in the entire hallowed grounds. But Nether Maiden said that it couldn't control and manage Nameless City. So it made Xianxia feel very puzzled and curious. Nether Maiden fell silent for a short while before she spoke again. This city has another name, the City of Sin. When she spoke up to this point, she stopped moving, turning around, gazed at Xianxia, and spoke in a very serious tone. I wasn't afraid that you would offend a power like the Endless Alliance when I told you not to cause trouble. I was afraid that you would offend someone or some power that you can't afford to offend. She fell silent once she spoke up to this point. Xianxia laughed bitterly and said, "Hey, don't stop halfway. Beating around the bush is a bad habit. There are many people here who aren't from profounder continent. They are from the outer heavens," said Nether Maiden solemnly. The outer heavens. Xianxia's expression changed, and he said, "How could that be possible? The people from the outer heavens can come to our world with ease." She replied, "Of course. But the precondition is that they aren't at the Saint Realm." "Why would they come here?" asked Xianxia. "They didn't come here because they wanted to. Most of them were exiled here or were forced to come here by their enemies. In short, regardless of the reason, they're bound to suffer a miserable fate." She continued, "The defiant profounders are confined here, and those fellows above us intend to use this world to bury the defiant profounders. On the other hand, they are here to be buried alongside the defiant profounders. It isn't just them. All the myriad of living beings on this world will suffer the same fate." Xianxia spoke abruptly. "All of you are willing to be buried with them?" That was the biggest question in his heart. Because while the defiant profounders would perish once the world collapsed, how could the members of the hallowed grounds survive? "There's a way to survive," she said. "If the defiant profounders are killed before the world collapses, then a small number of people will be able to live." "But the defiant profounders can't be killed," said Xianxia in a low voice. She replied, "In the past, that was indeed the case. But it isn't the same now. The undying bodies of the defiant profounders will cease to exist in some time from now. At that time, they just have to be annihilated, and then the heaven path would be opened and some would be allowed to leave this world." Xianxia asked, "Who are these some people that you speak of?" She replied, "Existences at the 9th rank of the monarch realm and above. In other words, even if the defiant profounders are killed, those below the 9th rank of the monarch realm will still have to die," said Xianxia. She replied, "That's the only way or everyone will die." Xianxia fell silent. Now, he finally understood why the members of the hallowed grounds were killing the defiant profounders with all their might. It was because they would die if they couldn't kill the defiant profounders. She explained, "Nameless City is filled with many who are from the outer heavens. Even though they aren't at the Saint Realm, most of their strengths are extremely terrifying. At the very least, it's extremely terrifying in this world of ours. Of course, if the hallowed grounds united and paid a heavy price, then it would still be possible to annihilate them. However, it isn't necessary, because all of us will only be able to live if we kill the defiant profounders. So we refrain from attacking each other." Xianxia nodded. Now, he'd gained a slight understanding of Inin's background. "What I just spoke about is top-secret information in the hallowed grounds." She suddenly gazed at him and said, "Do you know why I told you all of this?" He shook his head in response. "Indeed, if news of this were to spread, then there would be no need to wait for the defiant profounders to emerge because the hallowed grounds would fall into chaos on its own." She looked him in the eyes and said, "Because I hope that you'll stand on our side. Only by making you stand on our side would all of us have a chance at survival." As soon as she finished speaking, Nether Maiden's figure flashed and vanished before him. Xianxia stood silently on the spot. A long time passed before he shook his head, and then he turned around and walked into his room. At this moment, there was an old man standing within the room. The old man was none other than Man Yuan from the Man clan. "Young man, I've been waiting for you." Man Yuan waved his right hand, and then 4 black flags shot into the corners of the room. In an instant, a multicolored barrier of light appeared within the room. "This is a precious treasure of my Man clan, and it's at the saint rank as well. No one outside this barrier will be able to notice anything even if the heavens and the earth collapse here. Even if someone in the outside world notices it, even Nether Maiden would find it absolutely impossible to break through in a short period of time." "So, young man, you're dead." Man Yuan laughed savagely. "It isolates us from the outside world? Awesome." Xianxia flipped his palm, and then lunar reverie appeared in his grasp. Man Yuan had started following their group since the moment they left the ancient city of Hallows. But he didn't act impatiently because Nether Maiden was there. He hadn't acted within Nameless City just now because there were too many people watching, and Nether Maiden would definitely be alarmed if he couldn't finish Yang Yi with one blow. So, he had no choice but to wait bitterly for an opportunity. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait for long. "Young man, do you know what these flags are?" He felt that victory was within his grasps. So he wasn't impatient to act, and he started explaining instead. "These are barrier flags. So long as there are sufficient extreme-grade energy stones to power them, then not to mention an ordinary half-saint, it can even trap a mid-grade half-saint. So, it's impossible for you to escape today. A mid-grade half-saint?" Yang Yi, who was about to attack, instantly stopped himself, and then he frowned as he asked, "Half-saints are divided into grades?" At this moment, Man Yuan was clearly in a good mood, so he explained, "They weren't. But there are no saints on Profounder Continent while half-saints are the strongest, and there are differences in strength between half-saints. So our ancestors divided themselves into 3 grades. The initial grade, mid-grade, and high grade." "What grade is the patriarch of the fire spirit race at?" asked Yang Yi. "The fire spirit race's patriarch can barely be considered a mid-grade half-saint," said Man Yuan. "He's barely a mid-grade half-saint?" Yang Yi frowned slightly. If the patriarch of the fire spirit race is only barely a mid-grade half-saint, then Elder Mu and Lu Yen can only be considered to be mid-grade half-saints. If there's a difference between them, then it's because Elder Mu and Lu Yen are true mid-grade half-saints and not barely able to be considered as being at such a grade. But it's very likely that high-grade half-saints exist in the hallowed grounds. "All right, are you going to take your own life? Or should I do it for you?" Man Yuan spoke abruptly. "Don't bother trying to beg for your life, because you have to die no matter what. Not only do you have to die, I'll even be hanging your corpse outside the ancient city of Hallows once I've finished studying the secrets of your body. Only then will I be able to show the world what the consequences of insulting my man clan are." Yang Yi suddenly said, "Are you really sure that it's impossible for the outside world to know about anything that occurs here?" Man Yuan laughed coldly and said, "You can forget about seeking help from Nether Maiden. So long as they are provided with sufficient energy stones, then these barrier flags can even trap mid-grade half-saints, let alone a tiny monarch realm profounder." "Great!" Yang Yi nodded, and then the stone of suppression appeared in his grasp. An invisible force instantly appeared in the room, and then Man Yuan was instantaneously suppressed to the 9th rank of the monarch realm. At the same time, a black-robed old man suddenly appeared by Yang Ye's side. The black-robed old man was Guardian Lin from the fire spirit race, and he was the only half-saint sword servant which Yang Yi possessed right now. This sudden change of events utterly stunned Man Yuan. After all, his cultivation had suddenly dropped to the monarch realm, while another half-saint had suddenly appeared in the room. Moreover, the aura of that half-saint even surpassed his own. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? Man Yuan seemed to have lost his soul as he gazed at Yang Yi. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed drastically as he cried out involuntarily, You're Yang Yi. You're that Yang Yi who annihilated the fire spirit race. You!" Man Yuan intended to remove the barrier while he spoke as he was prepared to flee. What sort of existence was Yang Yi? He was one who'd killed numerous elders of the hallowed halls and even destroyed the fire spirit race. Even though Yang Yi was only at the monarch realm, Man Yuan was very clearly aware that it was absolutely impossible for him to kill Yang Yi on his own. It was even to the extent that his life was in danger. Especially because there was another half-saint here, and he was only at the monarch realm now. So he'd decisively chosen to retreat. Because Yang Yi would definitely die if he could escape. Unfortunately, it was still too late. First, the half-saint sword servant utilized its aura to forcefully restrain him on the spot, causing his speed to become extremely slow. After that, a ray of light that was swift to the limit flashed by. It was swift to the point it was practically impossible to see, and if a hole hadn't been pierced open on Man Yuan's stomach, one might even think that the ray of light hadn't even existed. Even though such speed could pose a threat to him while he was at the half-saint realm, it wasn't sufficient to kill him. However, his cultivation had been suppressed and Yang Yi was even assisted by a half-saint. So, Man Yuan wasn't able to counterattack at all. Man Yuan was dead. He died from a single swing of Yang Ye's sword. Yang Yi walked over to Man Yuan, waved his right hand, and then placed Man Yuan's corpse within the primordial pagoda. Even though the sword spirit wasn't able to refine sword servants for him right now, he could because she'd given him the method before she fell into deep sleep. Another half-saint sword servant. Master, I feel that I'm on the verge of advancing in my cultivation. Meanwhile, Guardian Lin spoke abruptly. Advancing? Yang Yi was slightly stunned and said, Are you sure? Guardian Lin said, To tell Master the truth, I was at the peak of the initial grade of the half-saint realm. But I wasn't able to obtain any fortuitous encounters throughout these years and have been stuck at the initial grade. However, there's abundant energy within Master's pagoda, and I even sense that the spirit energy there is slightly unusual. In any case, I really yearn to obtain even more of that type of spirit energy. I've been ceaselessly absorbing it and cultivating lately, and then I noticed that I was on the verge of advancement. It's because of the primordial violet energy. When he heard Guardian Lin, Yang Yi instantly realized that while there was a pitiably tiny amount of true primordial violet energy within the primordial pagoda, the spirit energy within the pagoda wasn't something that the spirit energy of the outside world could compare to. Moreover, while there wasn't much true primordial violet energy in there was still some. So long as Guardian Lin absorbed just a little bit, then even that tiny bit would be a huge fortune to him. Guardian Lin's advancement was a good thing to Yang Yi. A very good thing. So long as Guardian Lin broke through and became a mid-grade half-saint, then Guardian Lin would still have a chance even in battle with half-saints like the patriarch of the fire spirit race. Moreover, if he had a mid-grade half-saint sword servant, then his chances of succeeding at rescuing the sword spirit would definitely grow much greater. In short, there would be numerous benefits from Guardian Lin's advancement into the mid-grade of the half-saint realm. How long will it take? Asked Yang Yi. He replied, It might take more than 10 days or it might happen tomorrow. I can't say for sure. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment and said, It's fine. I won't make you leave the pagoda for some time. Just rest at ease and complete your advancement. Yes. Guardian Lin bowed slightly to Yang Yi, and then Yang Yi waved his hand and instantly sent Guardian Lin into the primordial pagoda. After that, he looked at the barrier around him, and then he hesitated for a moment before he waved his sword lightly. A strand of sword energy shot forward and blasted against the barrier. Not a single sound resounded from the collision, and the barrier merely trembled slightly. Yang Yi was delighted when he witnessed this scene and said, Not bad. Not bad. Man Yuan wasn't exaggerating. It really is a precious treasure. Yang Yi waved his right hand, and then 4 black flags instantly flew into his grasp. He studied them for a while and discovered how to utilize them. They were just like the Herculean armor, and they needed his blood essence as well. Once he dropped his blood essence onto them, a connection was immediately formed between him and the flags. Energy stones were required to activate the barrier, and the barriers created by the flags were separated into varying grades. There was the Heaven grade, Earth grade, and Profound grade. The barrier Man Yuan created earlier was the lowest grade barrier, the Profound grade. So, it exhausted a comparatively smaller amount of energy stones. It needed around 1,000 extreme grade energy stones to be created. However, that was extremely terrifying to Yang Yi, because those 1,000 extreme grade energy stones were only capable of creating the barrier, and maintaining it required a huge amount of energy stones. For example, just less than 100 breaths of time had passed earlier, but Man Yuan had exhausted at least 5,000 extreme grade energy stones. Of course, it was quite a small amount when compared to the Earth grade and Heaven grade. Just creating an Earth grade barrier required 5,000 extreme grade energy stones, and then it consumed 100 every second. As for the Heaven grade, it was even more terrifying. It required 20,000 extreme grade energy stones to be activated, and it consumed around 1,000 every second. 10 seconds was 10,000, 100 seconds consumed 100,000. Yang Yi had decided that unless he had no other choice, he would absolutely not set up a heaven-grade barrier because he truly couldn't afford to do so. Yang Yi put the flags away and then looked through the contents of Man Yuan's spatial ring. He gained quite abundant gains from it. There were a few Dao rank weapons and techniques. Even though he had no use of most of them, they would fetch a good price if sold. Besides that, there were around 5,000 extreme-grade energy stones within the spatial ring, and that was definitely the most important resource to Yang Yi. After all, he just lost 5,000 a while ago. Yang Ye's heart still hurt when he thought about those 5,000 energy stones. Fortunately, he'd indirectly regained them. In the past, he had a few tens of thousands of extreme-grade energy stones, and he felt that it would be sufficient for him to use throughout his lifetime. But once he arrived at the hallowed grounds, Yang Yi realized that it was only a dream. Presently, he had around 10,000 extreme-grade energy stones and 7 1,000-year-old fire crystals. But he was very clearly aware that it wasn't enough. The slightest mishap might cause him to lose all of them. So, the important matter at hand for him wasn't just to earn points but to earn money as well. Yang Yi refined Man Yuan throughout the night. It was quite new to him in the beginning, and he'd almost destroyed Man Yuan's corpse. Fortunately, he slowly gained a grasp of the technique, so he gained a completely new sword servant at the Half-Saint realm. Early in the morning on the next day, Nether Maiden arrived before Yang Ye's room. "I have it. We can set out now." Yang Yi emerged from behind the door and said, "Let's go." She asked, "Was everything all right last night?" Yang Yi glanced at her, and then he shook his head. "It was fine. I slept until dawn." She gazed at him for a while before she nodded. "Let's go." As soon as they walked out of the tower, Yang Yi saw Qing Ming and Wang Yan, and both of them nodded lightly to him before withdrawing their gazes. Meanwhile, Yang Ye's expression changed because a young girl was standing not too far away from them. That young girl was exactly Yin. Yin saw Yang Yi emerge from the tower, and a faint smile instantly appeared on her face. She said, "Big brother, you're here as well." Yang Yi revealed an unsightly smile as he said, "What a coincidence." Wang Yan, Qing Ming, and Nether Maiden shot bewildered gazes at him when they heard him speak. Yang Yi gulped down a mouthful of saliva when he noticed their gazes and said, Don't tell me that all of you can't see her as well." Wang Yan and Qing Ming's brows knit together even more tightly, while the bewilderment in their eyes grew deeper. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched, and then he gazed at Nether Maiden. "What about you? You can't see her as well?" Nether Maiden looked along the direction of Yang Ye's gaze. A short while passed before she said, "Are you sure that someone is there?" Yang Yi was at a loss for words. This time, Yang Yi felt a chill run down his spine. He could accept that half-saints weren't able to see her because he'd killed many half-saints himself. So they weren't that mighty in his opinion. But it was quite terrifying that even Nether Maiden couldn't. "Let's go." Nether Maiden shot towards the distance once she finished speaking. Meanwhile, Wang Yan and Qing Ming glanced at Yang Yi before they left. Once Nether Maiden and the others left, Yin suddenly said, "Big brother, that big sister was lying." "She was lying?" Yang Yi was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Yin grinned and said, "She could see Yin." Yang Ye's expression changed slightly. "So she could see Yin. Then why did she act like she couldn't?" Meanwhile, Yin continued, "Big brother, you have to be careful while you're by her side." "Why?" asked Yang Yi. "She isn't alive." Yin said, "There's no vitality in her, nor does she possess the aura of a human. Moreover, her lifespan should have been exhausted a very long time ago." "Then why is she still alive?" asked Yang Yi. Yin grinned and said, "Reversal of yin and yang." "Reversal of yin and yang?" Yang Yi frowned. Yin walked over to Yang Yi and said, "Big brother, do you know that besides people Yin allows to see Yin, there are only two other types of people who can see Yin. The first are those very formidable people, and the second are those who aren't alive. That big sister from before was part of the latter." "Big brother, do you know which type you are? Didn't you allow me to see you?" Yang Yi was puzzled. She shook her head in response. It was me in the beginning because I was hungry, but I didn't allow you to see me just now. But you were still able to see me. A drop of cold sweat emerged from Xianxia's forehead when he heard this, and he gulped down a mouthful of saliva before he said, "Don't tell me that I'm not alive as well." Inin said, "You're definitely alive, because you have the aura of a human and vitality. But you're clearly very weak, so why can you see me? It's so strange. Very weak." Xianxia's mouth twitched. He hesitated for a moment and asked, "How strong are you?" It was something he really wanted to find out. "Very. How much is very?" She blinked and said, "I can eat up everyone in this city." Xiangyi was speechless. Inin grinned, and then she walked over to the Tower of Buddha. She turned around to look at Xiangyi when she arrived at its entrance, and she said, "Big brother, you can come play with me in the future, and it'll be even better if you bring more food for me." She turned around and walked into the tower. Xiangyi stared blankly for a long time on the spot. At this moment, his mind was in slight chaos. So Nether Maiden isn't alive? Then what is she? A soul? What's that reversal of yin and yang that she spoke about? Why was I able to see yin? Xiangyi couldn't wrap his head around it no matter how he racked his brains, and yin clearly had no intention to tell him the answer. Xiangyi remained silent for a while before he vanished on the spot. After he left Nameless City, Xiangyi saw Nether Maiden, but Wang Yan and Qingming weren't with her. "They've gone ahead," said Nether Maiden. Xiangyi nodded and said, "Let's go." She suddenly said, "Aren't you going to ask me why?" Xiangyi shook his head and said, "You would tell me if you were willing to. Otherwise, it's pointless for me to ask." She suddenly said, "Don't come into contact with her in the future." "Why?" asked Xiangyi. She fell silent for a short while before she said, "She's very dangerous. If she wanted to kill you, then you wouldn't be able to resist at all with the strength you possess right now." Xiangyi gazed at Nether Maiden as he asked, "Is that the true reason?" Nether Maiden remained silent for a long time before she spoke. "I presume you've figured out her origins." "Yes, she's from the outer heavens. I can only say that most of the people from the outer heavens are pitiable people, and it's exactly because they are pitiable that they are terrifying. Because most of their minds have warped. Their moods change erratically, and they are extremely strong. So, you might die at any moment while in contact with such people." Xiangyi fell silent for a while before he said, "Thank you for the warning. I'll keep it in mind. Let's go." She glanced at him, and then didn't speak another word. She just flew into the air and Xiangyi followed behind her. 2 hours later, their group of 4 finally arrived at the Netherworld Ocean. As he stood at the shoreside and gazed at the ocean, Xiangyi couldn't help but frown. The ocean was simply boundless. There was no wind or waves to be seen, and it was like a pool of deathly still water. Most importantly, the ocean water was dark blue. Meanwhile, Nether Maiden flicked with her finger, and a ray of white light flashed. After that, 2 golden talismans appeared before each of them. She said, "One of them is a 5-element divine talisman, and it's capable of improving your strength, speed, and defenses by 5 times for 2 hours. It won't be a problem for each of you to keep 3 half-saints busy during those 2 hours. Right?" "No problem." Wang Yan was the first to speak. "No." Qingming spoke right after. Xiangyi gazed at the golden talisman in his hand, and then he shook his head. If he only had to keep 3 half-saints busy and not kill them while his strength, speed, and defense were increased by 5 times, then it wasn't a huge problem at all. Nether Maiden nodded and said, "The other talisman is a substitute talisman, and it allows you to summon a substitute puppet to take your place at a dangerous moment. It's able to absorb 50% of the damage you suffer. So, I presume that unless you encounter one of the supreme experts of this world, any other expert wouldn't be able to kill any of you with a single strike while you have it in your possession. Of course, it can only be used once." All of them were visibly moved. What did its ability to absorb 50% of the damage they received mean? It meant exactly what Nether Maiden had said. Unless they encountered a supreme expert of this world, there was absolutely no one who could kill them with a single attack. On the other hand, in Xiangyi's opinion, Even a supreme expert might not be able to kill him with a single attack, because his physical defenses were already heaven-defying. Nether Maiden continued, "Our mission this time can be said to be very simple, yet it can also be said to be extremely difficult, because we'll be considered to have completed our mission if we're able to figure out the origins of those stone coffins or take them back with us. However, I presume all of you should be clearly aware that it definitely won't go smoothly. You wouldn't have asked us to come with you if it was simple." Wang Yan said, "Your Highness, enormous benefits are naturally accompanied by enormous danger. We understand that." Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, 4 figures whistled through the air, and then 3 men and a woman appeared before Yang Ye's group. The man who led the group was slightly stunned when he saw Yang Yi and the others, and his gaze swept past them before finally descending onto Nether Maiden. He said, "You're Nether Maiden from the Hallowed Halls, right?" Nether Maiden nodded lightly. "So you are that Nether Maiden who's ranked at the first position on the Hallowed rankings." The robust man who stood at the side of the man who led the group suddenly laughed coldly. "They say that you're the #1 genius in the Hallowed grounds. I, Manly, am very doubtful of that. Why don't we have a spar?" Nether Maiden frowned slightly. Meanwhile, Wang Yan said, "The man in the lead is from the dragon race, and his name is Long Xian. He's the #1 genius of the dragon race and has once eaten a human half-saint. That fellow on his left is Man Li from the Man clan, and he has killed a human half-saint on his own as well. The man on Long Xian's right is Lei Huan from the Lei clan, and he has killed a half-saint on his own as well. As for that woman, I've never seen her before." Yang Ye's heart shook when he heard Wang Yan. At this moment, he realized that the monstrous geniuses of the hallowed grounds were much more numerous than he'd imagined, and they were much stronger as well. It wasn't just their geniuses. Even the true strength of the entire hallowed grounds was much more formidable than he'd imagined. He'd originally thought that he had a very good chance at rescuing the sword spirit's main body, but now he realized that even if he could head to the pagoda of confinement, his current strength was probably utterly insufficient. Perhaps he might even lose his life there. "I'm still not strong enough." Of course, the matter of rescuing the sword precursor could allow no delay as well. At this moment, Yang Yi had decided that once he was done here and obtained the points from the mission, he would make his sword servant, Guardian Lin, become a mid-grade half-saint no matter the cost, and then immediately head to the pagoda of confinement. Yang Yi became quite impatient when he thought about earning points, and he gazed at Nether Maiden and said, "Should we head down?" So long as they completed the mission, they would be able to obtain 100,000 points at least, and that would be sufficient for him to head to the pagoda of confinement. Nether Maiden clearly had no interest in Long Xian's group, so she immediately nodded and said, "Let's go." Stop right there. Right when they intended to head down into the ocean, Man Li suddenly laughed coldly and said, "Are you going to be that rude?" Yang Yi was quite speechless when he heard this and said, "Hey, are you looking for trouble?" Man Li laughed coldly and said, "You can think of it like that if you want." Yang Yi was quite stunned. He'd clearly not expected these fellows to look for trouble with them. Meanwhile, Wang Yan suddenly said, "The other races are quite hostile to us humans. So, if we humans encounter the members of the other races, then it would mostly cause some conflict to arise." That's racism. Yang Yi finally came to an understanding. He didn't speak further and just gazed at Nether Maiden. In any case, she was leading the group. Nether Maiden clearly didn't want to waste time, so she disregarded Manly's group, turned around, and walked towards the ocean. Yang Yi and the others naturally followed behind her. As expected, humans are cowards. Meanwhile, Man Li suddenly laughed with ridicule. Long Xian, who stood by Man Li's side, remained silent, and there was only a mocking smile on his face. Nether Maiden still didn't stop. The smile of ridicule on the corners of Man Li's mouth grew wider when he witnessed this, and he said, "So the human race is filled with such cowards. I've already said so much, yet all of you are actually not angry. Were all of you brought up by weak and lowly dogs?" This time, Nether Maiden and the others stopped simultaneously. Excitement appeared on Man Li's face when he saw this scene, and he said, "You're angry? Good. Come on. Let's have some fun." All of you can't afford to do so. Nether Maiden finally spoke.